Yes. When I'm a member of the audience, I'm sitting back, relaxing, enjoying, and having fun with myself, I suppose, listening and getting what the message is in the speech. Not worrying about how they're presenting. Are they using proper body language or eye contact? I just want to get the speech. When I'm an evaluator, I want to get the content, I want to get the context, and I want to get every nuance that I can so that I can hopefully serve that member in a way that will improve them in future speeches.
David, is there a methodology that you use when you're evaluating a speech?
Well, that I dance around depending upon the speaker. If I've talked to them ahead of time, which I always try and do, and I look for what their challenge, they're going to tell you what they think their challenge is or to watch for something. And I often will put that as the key element that I'm dealing with in the speech. Because as I said, my experience has been that most people are their harshest critic. So I will downplay maybe some of the other things and emphasize what they've told me they're looking for. Now sometimes a speaker will say, well, just follow the manual, they won't give you any key. In that case, I try and look at the opening and closing and the body. So they're kind of the sandwich thing, because on a good speech, the opening and closing, I think, should wrap up that whole speech, and I'll concentrate on it that way. So it varies depending upon the speaker's needs and his goals or her goals.
Okay. Elaine, speaking of goals, what's your goal when you're evaluating a speech?
Well, I believe that my goal has recently changed when I evaluate a speech, and that is totally due to Ted Hess being a member of this club and coming up here and shaking us up by telling us we're not as good as we think we are. So I think that at that point, I started looking again from a fresh perspective, Ted's perspective, at what it is we do. And I think evaluations were something that I had gotten pretty complacent about. And I'm not complacent any longer. I'm listening. I'm really, truly putting myself in a position to try to help that speaker improve. And I think I had stopped doing that a while back. So it's always good. That's one of the things I like about this club, is that we get fresh people, we get new ideas, and we stay fresh as a consequence.
David, I get the perception that you like evaluating speeches. What do you like about evaluating a speech?
I like the opportunity to encourage someone to stay in Toastmasters, basically, and encourage them in whatever path they've chosen or goals they've set for themselves. Because as we all know, everyone in this room has a different purpose for being here. Obviously, we want to learn how to speak better, but for some people, it's to make presentations to clients. For others, it is a hope and a dream out there to be doing seminars or presentations, even professional speaking. And we've had, in my years of membership in this club, we've had 7 or 8 professional speakers in here, and we still have a few today. So it depends on what the person's looking for, but I look, how can I encourage them in that way and gently give them challenges from what I saw or heard that they can incorporate into that pathway that they've chosen for themselves. So it's always a balancing act, and it's always tough, but that's what makes it interesting.
Doug, what would you say is the most frequent mistake you see from an evaluator?
The most frequent mistake? I don't usually see, well, yes, I do. The most frequent mistake I see evaluators making are the ones that Ted Hess pointed out to us. Thank you, Ted. We have, as Elaine pointed out, gotten complacent as a club, as a group, in our evaluations. And so the most frequent mistake I see is the person getting up and telling the speaker what a swell job they did, when in fact every speech given before any club can use some input to give it something extra, something that will allow it to grow and change for that member. It's our job to look for that and ferret those things out and make them real to the member. That's how we serve.
Thank you. Elaine, you mentioned that we would become complacent. What do you think has caused us to become complacent And also on that level, is it because that being an evaluator is difficult and there's things we don't like to do when we're an evaluator? So as far as, what do you think made us complacent?
Well, I believe, as in all aspects of our lives, when we get comfortable and we think we are the best, and we keep telling each other how good we are, and how we are the best club in San Antonio, and when we have polished our halos so much and bragged ourselves up so high, I think that leads to complacency. So we need the shake-up of a new point of view every now and then. And the rest of your question, I'm so short memory right now.
Is there something you dislike about evaluating the speech?
Something I dislike personally about evaluating speakers?
Or that you find challenging?
Well, I can tell you that a number of years ago, when I was quite a new member in this club, one of our old and much respected members did an evaluation on me that almost sent me packing, because that evaluator made a joke about something having to do with death, and I had just experienced the death of my grandson, and it was devastating to me. So one of the things that I try always to remember after that event happened is we don't know what's going on personally in each other's lives, and we might touch a nerve that we never meant to touch. So I try always to think, I don't know what's going on in your life, Albert. Maybe I should be careful with what I say when I'm an evaluator. So I think we always have to be aware of that, and that's one of my fears, is that I will touch a nerve like someone did to me and send someone away from Toastmasters that could enjoy years of improving in this club and having the fellowship of the friendship in this club.
Doug, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that you're getting ready to evaluate somebody that didn't do a very good job. So how do you approach that particular evaluation?
Well, I don't start my evaluation with, "That was a terrible speech." What I'll generally do is I will always, you can always find, well, I heard one speech where I didn't think I could even find a good thing about the whole speech. Anything in the speech was particularly good. And that speech was a tough one, probably the toughest I ever had to evaluate, because the speaker was awful. So I approached that very gingerly and simply said, what an interesting speech. You know, we can find different words to use and say what an interesting speech that was. And the subject matter was such and so, and would find things to compliment him on, even though he was challenged. Getting to the part where improvement comes, well, that's really kind of simple, because he had laid out such a broad field. And so I just picked out one thing, and one thing only, and simply said, you know, I think you would add impact to your presentations in the future if you might want to try this. And I gave him an example of how to do what it was I was suggesting. It worked. He stayed in the club. He did get better, and life went on.
David, would you like to wrestle that same question?
What was the question again? Well, as Doug said, there's always something you can say. And you need to start out with a compliment. I think it's always important to do. And I concur with Doug. I had to do an evaluation one time for someone who was just so bad. And it was their fourth or fifth speech, and it seemed as if they weren't getting anywhere. But they did have, there was one little thing that they were fairly good at, and I don't remember what it was at the time, but we'll just say it was eye contact. And so I said something about their eye contact, and in my mind, having talked to them, I knew that they were working for, there's a lot of things they were trying to do, and I just, like Doug, you take one thing and say, you know, the next step, you're good at eye contact, but the next thing that you can do to start moving yourself forward is such and such, and I don't remember what it was now. But you do start sweating, and you do have that, when you've got a speaker who needs a lot of help, it's impossible to give a scattergun shot. He'll drive him away, like Elaine said. You can't